This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by
Goldie Wilson for mayor of Hill Valley. Progress is his middle name.
and the letter P. You can't spell pants without P. And yes, your butt does look fat in those pants. Hugely, massively. Just so fat.
Houston, flight is go.
Myla, let's go. SPM. SPM. Safety contact. Let's go.
From Amalgamated Storytelling and the Sonia Show blog, it's Dorking Out with Christopher Allen Smith and Sonia Mansfield. Welcome to episode X2 of Dorking Out. That's the second episode of our trial experimental period before our official Gold Master launch, which will be coming in the next week or two. Dorking Out is the podcast for anyone who likes to dork out about stories and the stories in pop culture that we love. That means movies, TVs, books, podcasts, and pretty much everything else. With me today is my co-host, professional writer, and author of The Sonia Show, Sonia Mansfield.
Hey there.
Hey
And with
there.
me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author, Christopher Allen Smith.
How much have you been drinking?
Well, I don't want to say.
That means a lot. All right, so today's topics on our show are, what do you do when a story isn't working? And that is inspired by certain disturbing rumors coming off the Star Wars Rogue One set. A new recurring segment, which we are confident will be recurring a lot, which is What is Hollywood Remaking Now? That allows us to kind of examine the whole idea of remakes and what they mean in popular culture for us. And our third topic is binge-watching. Is it really a good thing? But first, this week's interesting headlines. First up is one that I thought was interesting. I am fascinated by this movie, which is last year's train wreck Hindenburg disaster of a film, Fantastic Four. While out promoting the recent X-Men Apocalypse, X-Men producer Simon Kinberg, who is also working on Rogue One and worked on Fantastic Four, talked about how despite Fantastic Four being a train wreck of recent legendary proportions, he wants to do another movie with those actors doing basically a sequel to a movie that no one went to see and everybody who saw it thought was universally awful. What do you have? Do you have anything to say about this, Sonia, or is this just me and
I'm
my
trying
lurid
to
fascination?
think if there is another example of this so that I could say, this is a great idea. Remember when blank did it? But I can't think of one.
I know, and it's funny because I'm watching it. Fantastic Four, we've made jokes about it on the other podcast that we are on sometimes, which is Anthony C. Ferrante's Pop Show, about just the weirdness, and, it was a spectacular Hollywood train wreck last year when Fantastic Four came out. But what was strange about it is the first third is a pretty good movie. The first third is like, I remember watching it and I knew the Rotten Tomatoes score going in and I knew the reputation of the movie as it was coming out and I knew it was going to be awful. But for the first third, I was thinking, what the hell are people talking about? What's going on with this? And then, probably 40 minutes in, it takes this left turn and oh boy, it was all kinds of strange and awful. It had this weird jump ahead in time. Which is, the first third is Reed Richards and everybody in the Fantastic Four becoming friends and becoming acquainted and starting to do something together. Something bad happens, and then it fades to black, and it fades up, and a year has passed. And it's kind of like they skipped over the movie that people would want to see naturally, and then went to this weird little side story. And it was just weird, but Simon Kinberg has said that he thinks, he's essentially said this without so much saying it, that the director kind of screwed stuff up. He really likes the cast. He really likes the actors. He really likes the story. And he would like kind of a second chance with the cast.
He wants a do-over.
He wants a do-over. And, we're going to get back into kind of remakes later. And in a weird way, I think do-overs do help. They do, every great creative franchise has always had do-overs, has always had reboots to kind of refresh the idea.
But they do it with a new cast.
Exactly. One, they do it with a new cast. And two, if you don't reboot successfully, like with the Terminator franchise, they've tried to reboot it twice. Both have failed. And that franchise, I'm not sure there's a more dead franchise in Hollywood lore right now than the Terminator franchise. Here they did. They rebooted Fantastic Four 5 or 6 years after the last Fantastic Four movie. Neither series did that well. So yeah, I just find this fascinating of a producer who doesn't. It's kind of like he's still excited about the idea. He's still hopeful for the idea. The world has moved on. He's very successful, so it's almost like maybe he could pull this off, but he just can't let this bomb go, which I find fascinating. But anyway, interesting story. We'll have a link to that in our newsletter. That if you go to the Dorking Out, or if you go to dorkingoutshow.com, there's a link to our newsletter where you can sign up and get all that information there, because we send out all of our headlines and all of our story topics and more links that we don't talk about on the show in our newsletter.
Things that don't make the cut.
That's right, exactly.
The outtakes.
The outtakes, the interesting stuff. But now that I'm saying this in the body of the show, I'm remembering that we have a mid-roll that pretty much says all this. So, on to the next topic. Sonia Mansfield, Brie Larson is the new Captain Marvel. Talk to me about this.
I'm really excited for this. I'm really excited to see a female superhero. We really don't have much. We have Wonder Woman, who was, kind of a guest star in that other movie. And we have, Black Widow, who's not really a superhero. She's kind of an assassin. So I'm really excited for a full-on superhero. And I think Brie Larson is an awesome, amazing actress. Did you see Room?
You know what? I want to.
Well, you should.
I should.
She's amazing in it.
And I'm sure she's great.
I'm
However,
going to just throw the word amazing around.
She might be amazing. She probably is amazing. But my understanding, it's the story of a rape victim.
Yes.
Living in a room.
Yes.
With the child she's bringing up, who's the product of that rape.
Yes.
And the world she creates in that room to keep him from growing up in a totally psychotic state. Do I have this right?
Yes. See, it's a perfect fit for Captain Marvel, yes.
Let me tell you, I usually watch my movies Fridays and Saturday nights at the end of long weeks. And that movie somehow never makes it to the top of the list.
Yeah, it's more of a Monday night movie.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure I could find a night of the week.
Well, so her next big movie is going to be Kong Skull Island, so maybe that's more your Friday or Saturday night movie.
It could be. I will admit, since I have left the days of entertainment journalism behind me in the dim past, and I am free to choose the own movies that I go. I do go to art house movies sometimes, and I watch them sometimes. But movies that just sound that unremittingly grim, even though every critic in the world loves them, I find myself not doing them so much.
Well, this is why I still haven't seen The Revenant.
Exactly. Actually, yes. Thank you.
I'm like, my time is very limited.
Yes.
Do I want to spend it watching, Leonardo DiCaprio suffer?
See, I did watch The Revenant.
So no.
And I kind of wish I hadn't, even though it's a great movie, even though it's unbelievably... See, that's an interesting thing about these movies. Fantastic acting, great stories, look amazing, and you walk out of them going, ugh. Like the filmmakers.
I would say I'll tell you, Room is not. It doesn't. I'm not going to spoil it for people, but it's not a super bummer.
Okay, good. Actually, that's another thing. I still have not seen The Road from years ago.
I haven't seen that one either.
Everything I've heard about. Actually, the reason that Road popped up in my head, that's the one with oh my God, I'm old.
The guy from Lord of the Rings.
Guy from Lord of the Rings. Oh.
Viggo Mortensen.
Viggo Mortensen. See, I can see a V and an M. Viggo Mortensen. Yeah, he goes in a post-apocalyptic world with his son.
Yeah.
And, yeah, also, I have not seen that because
right.
of all the aforementioned reasons. Leading us to Story 4, the secret box office success of Zootopia. Zootopia, is that the #1 animated movie ever from Disney? Is that what's going on now?
It's made a ton of money.
It has.
A ton of money. It's like a secret, like the headline says, it's kind of been a secret success. Like, it's made like $1 billion. It's made more money than Batman v Superman. Not that that's hard, but
you know what I mean.
That movie was crazy popular. It's just, it's so interesting to me that this movie Zootopia, that it's not like I know a lot of people who are talking about it, and it's made like $1 billion.
You know, that's interesting because I watched it. I liked it. I like to make a point of seeing all of Disney's animated movies.
Yeah, I saw it too.
And it's like, yeah, that's a nice movie. Great, cool. But man, we must not be the target audience because the reasons for it to make this much money, or at least for me, I'm lost on it. It's a good movie, but $1 billion movie. But what I was going to say is Star Wars The Force Awakens just ended its domestic run in the United States, and it made like $963 million, almost $1 billion just in the United States.
Yeah, no, I think Zootopia's total is a worldwide total. But
what I was going to say is every story I have seen where a movie has made more money than Batman and Superman this year, and I think it's going to be like this for the rest of the year. It's going to be, it made, or like Deadpool made more than Batman and Superman. Every movie that makes, Batman and Superman made $800 and something million. Not the biggest movie in the world, but a hugely, massively popular movie. And and people, by the end of this year, they're going to start treating it like it was a bomb. They're going to start treating it like it was a failure, even though, it's
such a punchline already.
Exactly, which I feel bad, which is funny. Actually, this is really interesting, and we'll talk about this more at some other point, is Superman Returns, that people treat as a punchline now. When it came out, it was really popular. It was lauded by critics. It made tons and tons of money. I think it made more money. This is interesting. I was reading about it. It made more money than Batman Begins. But for some reason, it got this weird reputation. It got this, punchline effect, kind of like what's going on with Batman versus Superman. And then because of that, they ended up not making the rest of the
It must be
Superman
people who
movies.
talk to me because I didn't like it.
I understand why people don't like it. I did like it, but it's definitely a movie for the people that love the Christopher Reeves.
I love
Donner
the Christopher
movies.
Reeve one, and I still didn't like it.
Yeah,
I went on a first date, and there was no second date.
Oh no!
And he believes it's because he picked poorly.
Is he right?
No.
No.
I just wasn't that into him.
All right.
But
cool.
if he wants to believe it's Superman, that's cool.
Cool. Well, wait a minute. Did you still talk to this person?
Sometimes.
Interesting.
Facebook will do that.
Interesting. All right. Okay, so our last story for the headlines is J.K. Rowling attacks Hermione racists. Now, this story comes out of jolly old England, where they are putting on a 2-part Harry Potter play,
which I would love to see,
based on a story that J.K. Rowling wrote happening 20 years after the last Harry Potter book wraps up. And recently they've been kicking out a lot of photos of cast members, and Hermione and Hermione's kid with Ron are black, are played by English African or British African actors. And some people are going nuts and doing the, knee-jerk, poop talking on the internet about this. And J.K. Rowling just gave a recent interview where she was talking about how idiots are going to idiot. And I definitely see where she's coming. And I think... I
agree with her.
I agree with her to an extent. The people that are popping off and saying, she shouldn't be played by a black actress, she shouldn't be played by this, the plays are different from the books, which are different from the movies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, it's a totally different thing.
However, J.K. Rowling was instrumental in the Harry Potter movies. Unlike a lot of actors who sign over their books and they go make the movies and they don't have any control at all, she had control over casting. She had control over scripts. She had control over set design. She had control over all this stuff. And for some people to be, anybody that goes off on this, nice actress who's going to be playing Hermione, obviously they're not going to get any sympathy from me. But I could definitely see some, even maybe a pretty big chunk of Harry Potter fans going, hey, wait a minute. This is the same character as in here that she helped cast, having questions about it or wondering about it out loud on the internet with some think piece about what it means to change an actress's race. I think her reaction of calling people racists might be a little much. I think she was talking about Twitter, so it's probable that she actually was talking about real racists.
I'm pretty sure she was.
But,
I'm sure she was.
But the idea that we're in a time where people are nervous to talk about the casting of a character that she herself helped establish on screen as a Caucasian actress.
Yeah, but the play's a totally different thing.
Well,
it's fine. I think it's totally fine. And
I definitely think it's fine.
I have to say, if I was a black person watching Harry Potter, I would be really excited that there was a black person playing such a pivotal role in this play, because I don't recall there being any black people in Harry Potter. Were there black people in Harry Potter?
Yeah, there are a couple black people. There are a couple people of Asian descent. There are a couple
that I remember.
But actually, this might play into our story later on remakes. How I am, well, you know what? We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. But I just thought that was an interesting story. We're going to have a link in our show notes and a link in our newsletter to this story. I wonder how long it'll be till they finally make this story into a movie, because they're going to do it. I'm sure J.K. Rowling had said this is for the stage, this is for this for that. Good and goddamn well.
Oh, they're going to back the money truck up.
This story is going to be made into a movie in the next 10 years. You heard it here, probably not first. Want more dorking out with Chris and Sonia? Well, there are a few simple things you can do. Share this program with a friend. We're assuming you have friends. It's easy. Just go to dorkingoutshow.com and you'll find our podcast links, our SoundCloud account, our YouTube links, our Facebook links, our Twitter links, our Tumblr links, and all our other links. And links. Grab one of those links and get to sharing. The more people listen, the more we make. Make all your friends envious with the cool podcasting choices you've made as a modern trendsetter. Our audience research shows the Dorking Out Show podcast audience is the smartest, most attractive, least prone to baseless flattery in the entire podcasting world. So get those links and get to sharing. Now, on with the show. All right, so topic 1. What do you do when a story isn't working? And this comes to us from recent reports that Star Wars Rogue One is having significant reshoots being done to it. Page 6 article came out maybe 2 weeks ago saying that Disney executives had watched the cut of Gareth Edwards' Star Wars Rogue One. This is the first movie in the Star Wars series that is not one of the big episode movies, but is kind of a spin-off movie. Apparently, the Disney executives watched this, were not thrilled with it, and ordered reshoots. Word came out a couple days after that things were actually much worse, and people were freaking out because apparently 40% of the movie is going to be reshot in the next 2 months, or 40% of the running time. Then an Entertainment Weekly story came out saying, no, this is kind of normal reshoots. We're going to do 3 weeks or 4 weeks of reshoots. It's not 40%. If it was 40%, this movie would be getting pushed back a year. That's not happening. Definitely. Then word came from the Latino Review, which is my favorite name for a nerd news website, saying that no, in fact, their sources at Pinewood Studios, where Star Wars Rogue One is being shot, is there are massive reshoots. A lot of the scenes that are not action scenes are being reshot. And it is, in fact, 40% of the movie is being reshot because apparently it doesn't, quote-unquote, feel like a Star Wars movie. It feels like kind of a grim war movie, which I myself, that's exactly what I want from Star Wars Rogue One. That is exactly what I want for a movie. You know, we've been promised no Force, no Jedi. This is just what it's like to be one of the troopers in the Rebel Alliance and what they go through fighting the Empire from day to day. But that, who knows?
Well, who knows what they mean when they say it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie?
Exactly. That's the thing. And the question for me is this Disney executives looking at charts, looking at, you know, the reaction of The Force Awakens, imposing a, you know, it's got to be happy, it's got to be plucky, it's got to have laughs, it's got to have this, it's got to have that.
They got to add Elsa from Frozen.
Exactly. Are they imposing what everybody liked about The Force Awakens onto this story, which is, you know, ostensibly the story of Rogue One is the story of the rebels fighting, soldiers fighting the Empire, but it's also the story of the plans of the Death Star being stolen.
Right, it's like a heist movie.
Exactly, like a heist movie. So that sounds great. That sounds fantastic. And I myself, I'm hoping, you know, a lot of times what happens is a creator is in the middle of kind of putting their story together. They show it to a group of people like executives that maybe are not versed in storytelling themselves. It's a work in progress. The director is kind of putting everything together. It's still not quite firing on all cylinders. The executives see that rough cut, freak out, start imposing a bunch of stuff on the director. So the movie, the good movie that would have been made if the director had just been left well enough alone, never emerges. The studio kind of imposes a bunch of stuff that kind of distorts the story as they were originally hoping to tell it. And if you're trying to put a happy, plucky, adventure-y feel on a grim war movie, which is kind of what was promised with Star Wars Rogue One, I'm not really thrilled with that, and we'll see.
Yeah, but we don't really know, and I know everyone kind of is freaking out. They think that this means it's going to be a bad movie, and I would argue that this is usually not the sign of a bad movie, that it kind of happens all the time.
It does happen all the time. In fact, one of the ways, well, to step back, it used to be a mark of a movie in trouble. Back in the 80s and 90s, movies did not have reshoots by and large.
I looked up some movies that had reshoots. Would you like a list?
No.
Okay.
No.
No?
No. I said no. How do you like that research now, huh? No.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I'm glad I've spent my time on that.
That's right. I'm glad you have too. Anyway, moving on. No. What was the what was
E.T.
Uh-huh.
Back to the Future, Jaws, Apocalypse Now, and Blade Runner all had reshoots. Significant reshoots.
That's interesting because all of those movies, I think, except for E.T., had very dramatic behind-the-scenes trouble.
Yeah.
Jaws is famous for the trouble it had.
Right.
There have been documentaries made about all the trouble they had working on Apocalypse Now. Two of those movies, that's interesting, Apocalypse Now and Back to the Future had their leads recast.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Well, see, that's the thing is a lot of times there are movies, and I'm going through this a little, or I've gone through this a little bit with myself with the book that I'm trying to write, is you have this story in your head. And I can't remember the name of the author that says it, but as long as you keep the story in your head, it's a perfect story. Once you start going, and that's why a lot of people fancy themselves, I could write a book, I could do this, I could do that. I just haven't got around to it yet. And it's usually because once you sit down and start getting around to it and taking the thing out of your head and putting it into the world, that's a very painful process, and B, a lot of times, even if you're successful, and this might be going on with what Gareth Edwards is doing on Star Wars Rogue One, if you're successful, you get it out of your head, you get it into the world, and movies are incredibly difficult to make. But you get it out, and then you watch it, and it's like, oh, the feelings I thought this would inspire, the impression I was hoping to create, the vibe I was hoping this would have, is not at all there, even though we've done the thing that I thought we should do. Where you're in this weird spot where the effect that you're hoping to have by telling your story is not anywhere on the screen or on the page. In fact, the effect might be the exact opposite of what you were hoping to do. And sometimes you can roll with that and just kind of figure out a different way to sell it. You take a comedy and now you're selling it, or you take a horror movie and now you're selling it as a comedy, or presenting it as a comedy, because a failure is a horror movie, but it's pretty unintentionally funny, so we're going to go that way. But yeah, I feel, I really feel for him. And I was just realizing this as we were talking about this, is Simon Kinberg was involved with X3, X-Men The Last Stand, which was famously one of the worst X-Men movies out there.
Yes, I've seen that one.
He was involved in Fantastic Four. He's involved in the Star Wars series. He was the guy that got Josh Trank a job on one of the Star Wars movies that he got fired from.
Oh. So you're saying he's cursed?
Well, that's the thing, is Star Wars Rogue One, if I remember correctly, he is, and I could be wrong about this, he's one of the producers on that, and this movie's having a lot of trouble.
Maybe he's a drama queen.
Maybe
brings a lot of drama with him wherever he goes.
Or maybe, here's the other thing, and this happens with a lot of high-end doctors, is they're so good that they only get the worst cases.
Right.
They only get like the stage 4 cancers. They get like the gunshots, between the eyes. Yeah. It's like, if anybody can bring this guy back, Dr. X can. Meanwhile, half of Dr. X's patients die because he only gets the ones that are on death's door. Maybe Simon Kinberg is working on all these movies because they're all troubled and he is the Johnny on the spot producer guy. Or maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe there's something going on with him. So, yeah, I mean, that's... And then it's, then I start to wonder, what do you do when something isn't working? When you have a product like Star Wars Rogue One? Because I know I've talked to friends going back years that, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have a movie about the soldiers that are fighting, to tell the story of the original trilogy from the point of view of, like, a stormtrooper?
I think it's great that they care enough to try to make it really good. Yeah. To be honest, I mean, they're going to get a lot of money no matter what. They could just, send it out there and we'd all pay to see it.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, and that's what I'm wondering, is if they're maybe going a little overboard with these reshoots and maybe giving the director a little bit more money, more time, more resources to do bigger reshoots just to make sure that they have everything. Because this is the first Star Wars movie not with a Skywalker in it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, unless the rumors are true. But, that we're going to see. So maybe they're just being extra, extra careful. Because you could imagine a Marvel movie universe where Iron Man comes out and everybody flips out and loves it, and then Hulk comes out and sucks, and Thor comes out and sucks, and Captain America comes out, sucks, 3 sucks in a row, we're done. And, that Marvel movie universe would go down in history as an interesting failure with 1 good movie and 4 bad ones. So maybe they're just, covering all their bases. Hopefully, they're not freaking out too much.
I'm going to put my trust in them. I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic too. I do feel
I
guess
try really
empathy.
hard not to read these stories because I don't want everything spoiled for me.
That's true, and I've been careful and kind of ginger in the way that I
I was
read them.
very careful about The Force Awakens. I didn't read anything.
Yeah. Well, you didn't even see the second. You didn't even see some of the previews, did you?
Yes, I did not see some of them.
That is amazing.
And
All
I
right.
got magazines with it on the cover, and I just put them aside. And I'm like, I can read this in December.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So anyway, it got to got us thinking about what do you do when a story isn't working. And I think for me, the takeaway as we kind of talk through this is you have to just do grim work. You have to roll up your sleeves and dive in and start ripping stuff out or cutting stuff. It's just a hard, bitter slog. But I think the list that you listed off there is a pretty good one in that
Those are really good movies.
People course corrected. They were able to see what was not working. And, I've heard about books that have been, rewritten from page one because, the author gets finished. They read it through. Oh, my God, this sucks. I have to start over. And that may or may not be the reason that my book is a year and a half late.
Topic 2, a segment I think we're going to be seeing a lot here on our show. What is Hollywood remaking now? It was just announced last week that they are planning a remake of Splash. What do you think about that, Smith?
You know what? Here's where I'm going to piss a lot of people off. It's been very popular in the last 15 years. Or for as long as I've been covering movies from kind of the business side and paying attention to it from the business side of saying, oh, remakes, oh, Hollywood's bankrupt and blah, 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 blah. Remakes are... So let me step back. Remakes can be great. Remakes are one of those things that gets a whole lot of guff, and I think it only deserves maybe 30% of it. I think a lot of movies can stand to be remade. For my money, Splash is exactly the kind of movie that could benefit from a remake. It's a funny movie. It's a nice movie. I wouldn't call it a classic. It was Tom Hanks' first big starring role. It was really good. It was really funny, but it's not Casablanca. So remaking it doesn't really bother me. I am one of the heretics that would not mind a sequel or remake of Back to the Future, which I know has millions of nerds crying out in pain. He said, not at all inflating our audience numbers. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I think for me the big, and we're going to talk about this later in the summer when the Ghostbusters movie comes out and we get into that, is I think remakes always boil down to why are you doing it and what are you doing with it? If you're just, there was the famous remake of Psycho that Gus Van Sant did in the late 90s where he took Hitchcock's script, took Hitchcock's storyboards, and remade that movie shot for shot, start to finish, nearly same angle, same everything.
Yeah.
Which is an
with
interesting...
Vince Vaughn and Anne Heche. Yeah.
Exactly. Which was an interesting and totally needless and interesting idea, but as a viewing experience, it was just like, ugh.
Well, it just means he has nothing to say.
Exactly.
You have nothing to say, nothing different to say about this story. It's like we could just watch Psycho.
Exactly. Well, and that's the other thing is that, and one of the most famous, the thing that turned me around on remakes was Ron Moore's remake of Battlestar Galactica in the early 2000s, where he takes this campy, ridiculous, very 70s failed sci-fi show. And I'm sorry, but it did fail. It only had a season and a half. We all know it failed. I know there are Battlestar Galactica fans out there, but let's talk turkey. It didn't work. Anyway, So he takes the bones of this thing, strips off all the camps, strips off all the ridiculous stuff, remolds it as a kind of post-September 11th genocidal parable for how a culture deals with trauma, and it is one of the best, if not the best, kind of popular culture's recasting of, the September 11, post-September 11 America, and it's fantastic. It's a great piece of culture that was only possible by taking something and remaking it. So I'm kind of all for remakes. I'm all for this kind of stuff. What do you think of this?
I'm actually fine with remakes too. I mean, I would kind of prefer an original idea, but I also don't dismiss remakes. I think it's easy to kind of just crap all over them.
Right.
It's easy to like make a joke and, say that that's stupid and I'm not seeing that. But the truth is, like, there's a lot of really great remakes out there. And I think people need to remember that. But they also need to remember that Hollywood has always been making remakes.
That's
always.
Right.
If this isn't new, everyone's like, oh, they're remaking everything and they reboot everything. And it's like, they have always done this. And the one I always go back to is the Maltese Falcon.
That's right.
Hollywood
purists.
It was a book first, then a movie in the 30s, then a comedy like 4 years later with Bette Davis.
That's right.
And then there's the one with Humphrey Bogart that we all know and love and is one of the best movies, of all time. It's a remake.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, remakes are out there. There are 2 remakes of Casablanca out there. And if you want to get technical, people might love this. Barbed Wire.
What?
Pamela Anderson's big boob, futuristic Barbed Wire is a remake of Casablanca.
Okay, now I need to see Barbed Wire. Damn it.
It is a strange movie, but it's all about letters of transit and getting out of this sanctuary city and getting to freedom.
All right, I'll watch it.
No, don't watch it. It's awful. But what I'm saying is, see, that's in a weird way, is like, if you're going to remake something, really do something different with it. Take the bones. I mean, how many times do we have to see a remake of Hamlet?
Right.
Or like Richard III. Here's one. Richard III, played by Ian McKellen, but instead of a old England knights and horses, it's him cast in this 1930s style dictator thing. So that's a remake. I mean, they've been remaking Shakespeare since the 1500s.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And actually, this is one of the things I teased earlier is, one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, one of the reasons I like to think about this is because I try to create stuff, but I also like to see the process of creation and how does one person sit down, try to make a piece of culture and it turns out awful, and then another person sit down and tries to make a piece of culture and it turns into E.T. or the Maltese Falcon or Casablanca or whatever. Yeah. But every piece of big culture that survives through the ages has to be rebooted at some point. It's happened God knows how many times with Robin Hood. It's happened with Sherlock Holmes a million times. It's happened with Batman more times than I can count. Superman, Godzilla, James Bond, Star Wars in a sense, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek. Well, actually, yeah, that's true. Star Trek found a kind of a clever way to redo that, where it's kind of a reboot, but it's also connected to the original. So yeah, exactly. In order for any piece of culture that we love to survive for very long, it's got to be either remade or the original. And this is something that I've been thinking about with the Ghostbusters coming out and kind of why I'm feeling not too encouraged about it. There's got to be something in the original that is so special that kind of everyone collectively agrees you can't really top it. You can only do something different. Like, I think Casablanca, it's one of my favorite examples. Or like The Godfather. Like, you could do it, but you're just not going to improve on it. You might do something different. It might inspire you to do something cool, But there are certain kinds of movies, and I'm sure a lot of people would say Back to the Future 1 is in this category, where you just can't, it's so perfect, you just cannot redo it. And for me, Ghostbusters was one of those movies. But then there is the kind of remake.
But here's the thing. You will always have Ghostbusters.
That's true.
Like, even with a remake, you still have the original. It doesn't take anything from
that
it.
is true.
And that's what there's so much anger about this movie, and we're really going to get into it, I'm sure, when this movie comes out. But it doesn't diminish the original.
I agree.
You still have it.
Let me throw something out there as a possibility. There's two kinds of remakes. There's the remakes that we've been talking up here in the last little bit, which is you take an idea, you reform it, and you do something new with it. Then there's let's call it the Hollywood Suit remake, which is, hey, we got this movie in our library, we own the rights to it, let's remake it 20 years later and do something with it. And we've seen that with, RoboCop.
Total Recall.
We've seen it with a lot of movies lately. And those movies are never any good. They're always kind of defanged. They're always kind of not any fun. And the reason I think I'm nervous about Ghostbusters, even though, it's interesting. I think some of the marketing, and we'll get into this when we talk about Ghostbusters later, some of the marketing didn't do it any favors. It's not exactly clear if they've revitalized it and brought something different to it from a creative point of view, or if it is kind of a Hollywood Suit remake. I think the previews are not answering that question one way or another.
We're just going to have to wait and see.
We're just going to have to wait and see. So Kate Blanchett has joined, talking about spin-offs and remakes and all that. Kate Blanchett has gone into the all-female Ocean's 11, and for me, Ocean's 11 is one of those kinds of films, actually the original, and even the remake, where it's fun, it's light, you can do a million things with this idea, so why not remake it with an all-female cast, or why not remake it every 10 years with a different cast? It's
a good candidate for that.
Yeah.
There's some movies out there that are just kind of,
Yeah.
And it's like, that was good, or that was fine, or that's Ocean's 11, that sort of thing. And that's a good candidate for a remake.
Yeah.
Where a director can take it and put their own spin on it and make it special. Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure the original Ocean's 11, I don't recall it being particularly special. But I think Steven Soderbergh made his kind of special.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a really good cast and really good chemistry, and it was a very, very fun movie.
Yeah, I agree. Well, actually,
I think Splash could be I think Splash is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't hold a special place in my heart. But it's a perfectly fine movie. I remember really enjoying it.
Yeah,
it might be a really good candidate for a remake.
You know what? That the Ocean's 11 thing. So I think we're all agreed that a all female. I think. So Kate Blanchett, and who's the woman that's going to be headlining this supposedly in kind of the Danny Ocean's spot? Sandra
Bullock.
That's right. So this could be really interesting. But
I think this is all in talks. I don't know if it's actually happened.
I think it is in talks, but it's one of those levels of talks where you're starting to hear more and more news about it, and when it gets that kind of snowball effect, that usually means they're good to go.
Right.
Or they're getting close.
Because I think they're throwing around Jennifer Lawrence is going to be in it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, but this, actually, the Ocean's 11 movie kind of reminded me of something. And something that you said earlier, which is, well, you're always going to have this movie. They could remake it, but it's not going to take away the specialness of this movie. But one of the things that I've noticed in pop culture, one of my favorite series used to be the Alien series. The first movie, classic, amazing, great. Second movie, maybe even better. Fantastic, amazing. Third movie, depressing, existential, awful, train wreck. Fourth movie, mediocre, bland. Who knows what the hell that is. And then they did the Alien versus Predator thing. So it gets to a point where the balance of the movies in that series are awful. So it's almost like there's like a shelf in your brain, which is good. You know, it's either mostly filled with good movies or mostly filled with bad movies. And once it tips over into the awful movies, then it's not as much fun, you know. And I think Star Wars for a while was definitely in danger of that. You had the original trilogy, but every time you thought about them now, you had the prequels that were kind of also in your head. And does the whole series diminish when enough awful entries get put in?
Yeah. The whole Alien series is not my favorite series, but the first two movies are great, and Aliens might be one of my top 10 all-time favorite movies, which we can talk about when we do our segment about our favorite movies.
Yes.
Those awful Alien movies do not take away my love for Aliens. And when I watch Aliens, I still love it and think it might be a perfect action movie.
It's definitely a perfect action movie, but I hear you, because, you know, spoiler for a movie that's 25 years old. Every time I watch Aliens now, I think, all these people except for Ripley are going to be dead in the next 10 minutes, first 10 minutes of the next movie anyway. And that's a bummer. And that's, you know, the Ocean's 11 movies for a while were kind of like that. This really fun, surprising, light first movie comes out. Second movie, boring, plodding, meandering. Ugh. So it seemed like, good movie, and then they just ran it into the ground. Sucky second movie. And then the third movie was not great, but better than the second, so they kind of... And then they, I think, smartly said, all right, you know, that's it.
Yeah. You got to know when to, call it quits.
Exactly. They pulled their fat out of the fire, and then they realized, you know what, let's quit while we're ahead, in a very Las Vegas-style decision-making tree. They said, we're good, we got it, out.
So what I think is funny about this all-female Ocean's 11 film, which I believe is technically like a spin-off, and the lead character is going to be related to George Clooney's character in some way, like his sister or something. And I was like, well, why not just make an Ocean's 11 movie? Why does it even have to be connected at all, really? Like, can't we just have a heist movie with women? Like, do we need her to be related to George Clooney?
Well, I think a lot of people are. I mean, from a marketing point of view, it definitely helps.
I guess.
If you can say this is kind of another Ocean's 11 movie.
Right.
Because those movies do hold a special place in people's... Somewhat of, I should say. Yeah. They hold a warm place in people's hearts. I wouldn't say special place in people's hearts. It's warm. People like them. They're enjoyable. They're pretty fluffy.
Right.
So, but, you know, from a creative point of view... well, that's the other thing is people love connected universes now.
That's true.
What I think could happen is...
I can't wait to talk about the Ocean's 11 universe.
Exactly, that's right. What I think will happen is, like, there'll be all this talk about how, this happens, she's a sister of George Clooney, and then, like, in the first 10 minutes, she'll be getting off a plane, like, waiting for her cohort, and then she'll be on the phone and say, hey, yeah, all right, I'll talk to you at Thanksgiving, Danny. She'll flip her phone closed, and that'll be it.
Right.
She was talking to Danny Oceans for all of 3 seconds.
Yeah.
He wasn't even on screen. And then, connected. Technically, we're connected. All right, let's have our fun.
Okay, let's move on to topic 3. Is binge watching really a good thing? I put this one on our list to talk about because I have mixed feelings about binge watching. I have like a love-hate relationship with it. If I'm maybe homesick on the couch and actually have a few hours, I'm really stoked that I can binge watch Orange is the New Black. But most of the time, I don't have hours and hours to watch a show. I can just watch one episode at a time because I'm old-fashioned. And everyone else is binge watching, and it kind of makes it so that I can't be a part of the conversation. Basically, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Yeah, no, I do.
So, like, Orange is the New Black is coming out next week, and I will watch it. But it will take me, a month or two to get through it, probably. Whereas everyone else will watch it the weekend it comes out and talk about it, and then they'll be done. And I don't get to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. When Netflix announced that the way that they were going to put out their original series was all at once, they did this, I think they first did it with the first season of House of Cards. It sounded like, wow, that's great. That's amazing. You can just blast through it all. You can eat it all at once. And now I've kind of tried to binge watch, House of Cards, and my wife has watched Orange is the New Black, and there's all this stuff. And now it almost seems like trying to appreciate paintings in a museum by like running through the museum. Like you're just looking through it. Hey, that looks good. Hey, that looks good. One of the things that broke my heart the most, and when we start doing our segment in the future, Why Should I Listen to You, where we talk about our favorite pieces of pop culture, and you get to know who we are and why we like stuff, and whether or not you're like us and should listen to us when we review stuff. One of my favorite series is Breaking Bad. In fact, that is by far, not even close, my favorite series of all time. Number 2 is a distant showing. Anyway, my brother-in-law watched it all, I think, in a weekend. Or it couldn't have been a weekend because I think there's 60.
He watched the whole series?
He watched the whole series in like 1 week.
Jesus.
And
you can't process it.
1, you can't really process the beauty of that thing. 2, it's just one of the... I'm noticing this now that it's possible to binge watch stuff. One of the things I like about a show, and this is what makes watching Game of Thrones now so much fun.
This was going to be my example.
All right, well, actually...
No, go ahead.
Is you watch it, it comes to an end, like Jon Snow gets, punked out and killed, or he wakes up and the last shot of the episode is him pulling in this huge breath and, oh my God, he's alive! Cut to credits. It's just, It's a great old-fashioned storytelling technique where there's a cliffhanger at the end and you have to wait and you have to talk with your friends and you have to live with it until the next week when the next one comes out. And
so that's why shows like Game of Thrones and, I don't watch it anymore, but The Walking Dead, things like that feel special when they're on, and they're only once a week, and you have time to think after each episode about what you just saw and how it makes you feel and where you think it's going and where the show has been. And you don't get that with binge watching. And I get that some shows don't require that. Like if I was like, I'm going to watch Fuller House, I don't need a week to process an episode, but maybe House of Cards I would.
Yeah. I agree. And I think House of Cards is a great example because if that show was on HBO or FX or something, it would be one of the biggest things in pop culture right now. It would be the new Mad Men. It would be It would maybe not get the highest ratings, but like Mad Men, it would be winning Emmys across the board, even though I think it already is. It would be getting this huge cultural impact. And I don't think it has the cultural impact that it should because it's blasts out people. It comes out, people blast through it in a week or two, and something that would take 3 months, it's 10 episodes, 3.5 months or 3 months in a normal television cycle of putting on one a week or whatever. Don't check my math. People go through it in 2 weeks or a week or sometimes a weekend, which I think those people are crazy. And then it kind of evaporates until the next season comes out.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I was wondering, like, how does this work for Netflix that they put all this money and time into something like Orange is the New Black, and people are going to talk about it for maybe a week, and then it's just gone. We're done. We've all watched it, although I haven't. I'll be 3 months behind, but. Yeah. People talk about every episode of Game of Thrones for 3 months.
Yeah. You know what?
I'm like, you're blowing it. You could have 3 months of people talking about your show.
That's a good question. And to be honest, I don't know because, two thoughts come into my head. One is when people do this, they get this kind of weird bragger
Yeah.
thing where, oh, I watched the whole thing in 2 days. It's like,
And I'm like, good for you.
awesome.
You know-
So what?
I'm like,
You want a cookie?
I'm like, I spent time with my family and friends.
That's right.
I went to work.
You know, or I did not go to work, and I also did not spend 5 hours a day sitting down watching television.
Right.
He said in a way as though there was something wrong with watching as much pop culture
Right.
as you could possibly
Hey,
watch.
trust me, sometimes I'm jealous. I'm like, oh, I wish I could spend all weekend just watching,
Yeah.
whatever TV show I want to watch. But, I can't. I work, I have family, I have responsibilities. I have a young kid who likes to get out of the house.
That's
I can't.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
But there is this like bragging,
yeah,
especially on social media, and especially on Twitter. Like,
you know what?
but I feel bad. Like, I miss the conversation, and that's the part. Like, I can talk about Game of Thrones, and I'm excited that we all watch it together.
yeah.
It's one of the few things that we're all watching together. Like, we watch the Oscars, we watch the Super Bowl, we all watch Game of Thrones together.
Yeah.
It seems like people watch like The Bachelorette together. I don't watch that, but we don't get a lot of that now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but if there was a story coming out in IndieWire where they seem to have some of the numbers for Netflix's show viewership, which Netflix has been pretty persistent in not letting those numbers out. And apparently the reboot of Fuller House, correct my math on this, Sonia, has bigger numbers than Walking Dead. That if Fuller House was on a network, it would be the biggest show on television right now.
Yeah, that's what I read too. And I think that's weird. We've talked about this before. I don't understand the fascination with Full House or Fuller House.
Yeah.
It is way over my head. I live in San Francisco. The show was set in San Francisco. By the way, not filmed here, just set here. And everyone in this town loses their damn mind for Full House, and they talk about it all the time still.
Yeah.
And like on all the like San Francisco like sites, they're just like, let's talk about Fuller House and Full House this and the house from Full House, blah blah. And I'm like, oh my God, why are you talking about this stupid show with Bob Saget? I don't get it.
Yeah. No, I don't.
By the
get
way,
it.
Nash Bridges was filmed here. How come no one talks about that?
We all know why no one talks about that. Have you seen Nash Bridges?
No, but my parents have.
Exactly. Point taken. No offense to Mr. and Mrs. Elder Mansfield. But if they like a show, you know what? I'm not going to finish that sentence.
Yes.
All right. So, hi, Celeste. So, yeah, Fuller House, Making a Murderer are massive hits on Netflix. So maybe Netflix knows something that we don't. Maybe, well, you know what? I'm sure the way that they can dial in their metrics on people watching shows, I'm sure they know exactly what they're doing.
Well, sure. Any good content that gets people to come to their service and use it,
Yeah.
and gets people in the habit
Yeah.
of watching them is a good thing. I
Well,
get it.
you know what?
But me personally, I can't get on board,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, I think that's the thing is, Netflix's model, and I kind of like this from somebody in the corner of creators' point of view, is their model is only to get people excited and talking about it.
Yeah.
If you're getting people excited and they're talking about the show, that's the only thing they care about. So in a sense, every show that they create is an advertisement for Netflix, and you better get your next Netflix account. So maybe that's why they do it. There's a huge burst of, they spend $100 million on a season of House of Cards, and then for 2 weeks they get people freaking out on in every corner of social media talking about Netflix. I can only imagine how many subscribers they got after Making a Murderer came out in December.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the thing. And what's, I've heard some creators and some of the other podcasts I listen to that, they work sometimes they work for network shows, sometimes they work on Netflix, and they talk about the kind of night and day aspect of what they have to deal with network suits and getting notes on scripts and getting notes on cuts and getting notes on actresses and actors and all the raft of a word that I'm not going to say on this podcast that comes down on them. And then they go to Netflix and it's just like, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Pretty much whatever you want, do it. Bill Burr, a comedian that I like, he had a show on Netflix, and he said the only time he's gotten a note to push something farther and go further with it was when he was doing his animated show on Netflix. And they said, we like this, but we think you can go farther with it. He was kind of pulling back.
Well, there's no advertisers to offend, right?
There's no advertisers to offend. There's only, and maybe that is the future of where quality content has to go. No advertisers, but there's an understanding with the audience that if you want good stuff, you need to pay for HBO. You need to give us money directly for HBO,
right?
Or for Netflix, or for Hulu, or for Amazon. You have to give us, you have to pay money for quality content. And that's it. No more over the air or over cable or whatever. But we'll see.
Yeah. Do you have any shows you binge watch?
Not really binge watch. I am, it's funny that we're having this discussion. I think I mentioned this last week for The Americans is I think I'm going to wait until The Americans ends.
Right.
And then sit down. But I think the most I watch of a show in a night is 2 episodes of a show a night, like when we do House of Cards. It's 2 episodes. And even then, I'm not done processing one episode before we're on to the next one.
Yeah. So
I kind of don't like it. But no, I don't really. I found myself not really binge watching that much anymore.
Yeah.
Actually,
I really only do it when I'm homesick.
That's right. Well, what I was going to say is, having said all of that, I will sometimes go back and binge watch shows I've already seen and pull out specific episodes and just watch 2 or 3 of them in a row. And to kind of, I don't know, look at them and kind of take their stories apart and nerd out and dork out on them and examine stuff that nobody cares about and whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I really look forward to our podcast when we do our favorite movies and TV shows. That will be so fun.
It's going to be good. So I guess that's a good way to wrap up what's going on with the show.
Okay.
Is one of the things that we're going to do, fine listeners, in the upcoming episodes is let you know a little bit about us. We're going to take critiquing and movie reviewing and TV reviewing from a different point of view, which is we're going to tell you our favorite stuff we really like, stuff's important to us, and kind of put it all out there and talk about why we like it and let you kind of understand who we are and where we come from a creative point of view. So then when we talk about the new movie or the new whatever TV show, you'll know,
you have some context.
Yeah, you have some context. Chris's favorite comedy of all time is Airplane? Well, you know what? I guess I don't really need to listen to anything that he has to say because he's obviously an idiot. That kind of thing.
Nobody would say that about Airplane.
That's right. They shouldn't.
Because
it's the greatest comedy of all time. But, maybe
somebody might disagree.
Somebody might disagree, and when they do, they are free to listen.
Free to be wrong. That's all.
They're free to be wrong. It's a free country. For now.
For now.
And on that note, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.
All right, bye.
Bye. The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about The Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutro.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.